The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, welcome back to the podcast that floats down here. I am your host, Luke, and I am joined, as always, with Stephen King expert, Melissa.
I'm over here.
And Stephen King It fanboy, Benji.
Howdy.
We are here doing part 2, June of 1958, chapter number 7, The Dam in the Barrens. This chapter was 30 pages and is 2.75% of this book. For a summary, Melissa, what happened?
1985, Eddie drives through Boston, headed up the 95 to Maine, thinking of how scared they all were as kids, but not remembering how they used that to turn something around. He also thinks about doing anything that Bill would have asked, and Ben Hanscom's silver dollars. His thoughts wander more,
and take him back to 1958, to the day they built the dam. Eddie, Ben, and Bill meet back in the Barrens on the first day of summer vacation. Bill, distracted and distant. Generally, Ben took charge of the construction, and soon the dam was up and working. The boys sat, admiring the work during the lunch break, when Richie and Stan joined the group. After a scavenging trip to the dump, the dam was expanding, and soon the whole area was waterlogged. Ben was wary of Richie and his voices, but used the new recruits to improve the dam. Eddie thought about how well the five of them fit together, and that's when Bill started to talk. Bill recounts what had happened with Georgie's photo album, and as Eddie nervously watches the other boys, he saw recognition in their faces. Eddie, too, was reminded of his encounter at the house of 29 Nebolt Street. When Eddie couldn't find friends to play with, he would spend Saturdays wandering by the train tracks, once even getting lobsters thrown off a train for him. Nearby the track was an abandoned house at 29 Nebolt Street, where a hobo with syphilis once offered to blow Eddie for a quarter. Weeks later, he returned. Eddie crawled into the porch of the empty house, imagining life as a hobo, when a thing appeared. Like an undead leopard version of the sick hobo, this thing knew Eddie's name and introduced himself as Bob. The leper started for Eddie, who, in the middle of an asthma attack, ran for his bike, feeling the thing right at his back. Hearing it call his name, Eddie reached his bike, jumping on it and racing home, escaping the leper's grasp. Back to our dam building day, Bill finishes telling about the bleeding photo album, and Eddie chimed in with his leper story. Ben followed, recapping his cold day at the bridge. Richie couldn't seem to believe any of them, but not believing Bill would mean not accepting him as the leader. Stan at first denied having a small experience, but was about to admit to whatever happened to him when the boys were interrupted with a loud "Jesus Christ!"
All right. So it was a fairly short chapter compared to some of the other ones that we've had. Melissa, let's get started with some of the notes that you had.
So my first thought is, a lot of nothing happened, but it was good. Just a one-shot day with a typical Stephen King flair of flashbacks within flashbacks within flashbacks. And then flash forwards and back again. I couldn't keep track. So writing the summary was, I either had to write like a 7-page summary or keep it pretty short. So I was a little stuck. But I really liked the character drawing, as in like drawing all of them togetherness.
The first time we've really had full bore interaction between this many of the characters that we've been introduced to.
Yes, like you see how they're becoming a group,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a total throwback to Stephen King's giant Dark Tower saga. The word that keeps coming back to mind is the drawing of the three. That's what this chapter felt like, drawing in people. And I know we don't have everybody yet, but this is where it starts.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it's kind of my note with it was the group forming and feeling right after, when the dam was finished. Eddie was just like, yeah, this is right. Bill's our leader, and Ben's the brains, and Richie's the mouth, and Stan's there. Kind of just he's the quiet one. I did like that. Like I said, they all fit, and they all were drawn together for one reason or another to work on this.
So let's talk about how Eddie fits into all that. Eddie's the driver.
Yeah, he's the compass.
Yeah. And I really noticed, his whole vehicle and transportation and directional obsession, it comes up over and over and over again. So I kind of made a list of some of the times I noticed it.
Yeah.
So when he was driving the 1985 Eddie knew instinctively which lanes to be in. He didn't really need maps. The fact that he is a driver in New York City, it absolutely makes sense that that's what he does. But even driving through places he'd never been before, like Boston,
which they say is it's so complicated. Like it's one of the toughest cities to drive in, and he even mentions that he's like, yeah, but he didn't have a chance to make a mistake because he knew what to do the whole time, just naturally.
But then that also goes back to 1958 when Bill said he had a compass in his head. Him obsessively watching over trains whenever he had sort of time alone. He'd go there, watching the trains full of cars and saying, oh, someday I'm going to have a Cadillac.
And knowing where the train lines went, all the way across Canada and everything, too. Not just, these are the trains that are here, but knowing instinctively where they went and finding out where they went.
I was going to say with that one thing, his mother actually encourages him that because she tells him, this train goes here through Bunkport and Bahama and all those, and she actually sees that in him and actually helps to grow his his fascination or his love with either the trains or travel or destination.
Except here was my thought with it. Is his brain just wired to think in terms of travel, or is this some sort of subconscious thing for him to want to escape his life even as a kid? Because let's be honest, that guy's trapped.
Yeah. No, and that's a pretty good observation on it. I think more because I kind of have that skill, I guess, of compass and direction, and I don't get lost. So, I mean, it is kind of just a natural, inherent thing sometimes. I can't say I'm as good. I can't say I'm as good as Eddie is, but it's one of those. It's just, naturally, you can put me in any location, and I can find my way without really too much concern. So, I mean, I can see where you're coming from with the trap thing, and it's a good underlying, but I think on the surface, he just has that natural ability. My next note on this is Eddie's mom's voice fading off as he continued to work with the boys. Kind of seems like a trait that never really goes away in at least boys or men, just from personal experience, I can say. When you're, I don't know about, yourself, Luke, or anything, but as you're hanging out with your friends and stuff, your significant other's voice or, whoever is it kind of goes to the back of the mind. I read that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh. I read that. I just related.
I guess I didn't take it that way because to me that sounds more like choosing to do something that you're not supposed to over and over again. But I feel like for Eddie it was less about that and more about letting his mom's fears not take over for him.
And I absolutely do agree with you on that. I think I'll say it's probably a little of both, but probably more so on your end what you just said.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was him allowing himself to take the independence that he wants to have, and actually allowing himself to do the thing that he wanted to do without having a naggy voice that's constantly there for him even later on, it sounds like. And he let himself do the thing that was maybe ill-advised, but it's what Big Bill was doing,
Well, and I do agree that kids are kids, and I definitely think kids are going to do things that they know their parents don't want them to do because that's what kids do, and they make mistakes and they have to learn from them. But I think in Eddie's case in particular, it's less about being your typical defiant kid and more about finding your own way in the world where your mother has such a tight hold and she is by far the overprotective, overbearing, scared. She's insanely worried about everything that the anxiety eking off of her
Yeah.
is ridiculous, and that affects him. So it's more like he's escaping her anxiety, her unfounded anxiety, as opposed to a mom giving, reasonable, relatable advice. Hers is not reasonable. And
Right.
he's
And I
a
think
good
that's the
boy and
independence
doesn't-
from that
Right.
that's what I was trying to reference.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a distinction between a kid just not obeying his mom
Mhm.
and a
Oh,
kid
yeah.
who is
He's realizing
that
that
what his mom is saying isn't always
reasonable.
like
Yeah.
it's
reasonable or-
impractical. So one of my notes that I have for this is the whole scene where the boys are smoking. It feels like such an 80s book, like story thing for that to happen. That didn't happen in the later 90s. When I was growing up and seeing any kind of
Right.
story that would have like a similar group of kids. Like it makes me think of like the Goonies or like the Lost Boys.
Stand by me.
Stand by me.
Yeah.
Like it was such a common activity that kids did in those movies to show like
Because
no, go ahead.
because those movies were written by guys who grew up in the 50s and 60s
Who actually
doing
did.
this stuff.
Yeah.
Right, I know. And it's just so
That's what
like
they did.
like nowadays
Yeah. Like you look at
it just
Stranger
feels so
Things.
weird.
Yeah,
like seeing that.
Like if you go back and
Right.
like watch Stranger Things, which is a pretty good idealistically representation of the 80s. They're not showing kids smoking and all that because it wasn't as much of a forefronted thing as it was in the 50s for 13, 14-year-olds to be smoking. One note with that smoking scene I had, do you know why it's bad luck to have 3 men on a match?
I
No.
don't know.
It's actually an old military thing, basically, that you light the match. First guy lights a cigarette, the sniper sees it. Second guy lights a cigarette, the sniper's on it. Third guy lights a cigarette, the sniper pulls the trigger. So that's why it's bad luck to have 3 men on a match or 3 men on a lighter for a cigarette in the dark.
Let's talk about Stan.
Okay.
What about him?
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of my
That-
thought on him.
I got,
That's my thought. Does anybody else think so? So we've had a 1958 Ben chapter.
Mhm.
We've had a 1958 Bill chapter. Now we've had our 1958 Eddie chapter. And within those chapters, we've had glimpses of Beverly. We've gotten in this chapter a whole lot of Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
In the Ben chapter, we got a little bit of Eddie and Bill. In Bill, we got more about Ben and more about Eddie.
We had a
Again,
1958 Mike chapter as
We-
well.
yeah.
We did in the story of one of the
One of the
lost.
missing.
One
Yeah.
of the missing, right? So we got some of the Mike stuff. There has been nothing about Stan except that he's Jewish
And
Yeah,
quiet.
and quiet. And a
is
quick
in the
correction,
grade
Melissa,
below them or something.
just because you misspoke, this chapter we got a lot about Richie, is what you meant to say. You said
What did I say?
You said Eddie. So
I meant Richie.
I
You're
know.
right. Oh
Just-
yeah, we got
Yeah.
more about Richie than I probably needed, but
Yeah.
Richie. But like Stan, the one thing he says that was hysterical was when Richie starts accusing him of killing Christ. And he's like, I think it was my dad.
Mhm.
Like that was really funny.
I think it's meant to be that way because, like, even in the first chapter of the book, it wasn't Stan's point of view. I thought you were reaching at your throat because my voice sounds like this, and it just
Did
sounded
he
horrible.
even say anything in the first?
I'm
his
going to
first
take a
chapter?
bath. I was
Like
like,
that's like the only line. It's like the second line we've gotten from him. Is my point.
yeah, it's very much everything with Stan is based off of other
Well,
people's.
He did talk in his wife's flashbacks,
Yes.
but actually the night of that, we heard him talking on the phone to Mike. We heard him say he's going to take a bath, or she told us that he said that. I don't know if it was the actual dialogue. And
Right.
then there was some flashback dialogue. Now in this chapter, he said his dad killed Christ, which was really, really funny and very dry and a very funny sense of humor. And then at the end of the chapter where he originally was in denial about having a story similar to the other
Mhm.
boys, and then eventually was like, well, it wasn't a clown,
And
but
he gets cut off.
But that's it. Like we know nothing. We know nothing about his home life. We know nothing
Yeah.
about him. Or, like I don't know this guy.
And I
Mhm.
think that's by
always been my
design.
problem.
I think that's honestly by design, though, of Kings, to make you, because, I mean, because I'm blanking now, if we actually ever do get his full story, we'll have to find out. But it makes you wonder what happened. It makes you, really, truly wonder what happened to him to make him make the choice he did, at the beginning of the book, to kill himself instead of coming back.
But see, here's the thing. Because I'm getting so much about all the other characters, I don't care.
No, true.
which is terrible. And I want to care. I want to know, but I don't.
But he's written in a way that you don't care. Like, there's nothing
Yeah,
to care about. You don't know
exactly.
him, like you said. So
And you don't feel
No.
bad about not caring.
But I feel like I should care.
I think he was just King's way to get a seventh personality, a seventh body in to hit that magic number, and then he's like, I ran out of story for him.
I highly doubt
I
it.
know.
I mean, I feel like he maybe is supposed to be there and is almost a non-entity, because it does make you question a little bit, like, what is this kid's deal? Like, we don't know anything about him other than he's Jewish. They're broke. They're poor Jews.
And he likes birds.
And he's got a normal sized nose. Like, that's it. That was another really funny line too.
And this brings me to my next point really quick. Was Richie seems like your typical ADHD kid. Like,
Oh yeah.
complete. And this is before ADHD was really even known back in the 80s. They knew of hyperactive, but there was no diagnosis.
There was in the 80s.
Not as much. I mean, it didn't really become about until like the 90s, till I was coming up.
no.
No?
It was around.
Okay. I thought that like it really wasn't known or.
No, it was known. It wasn't diagnosed a lot, but
That's-
there was
okay.
like kids like on Ritalin by the late 80s.
Okay.
And-
All right.
But remember, this is Richie in the 50s.
Yes.
There was that. Like, it wasn't. It was just, he was just the kid who couldn't stop talking.
I liked Richie this chapter. I thought he was pretty funny. And I also like Eddie's take on Richie, like his characterization of him. You know, he goes through and says, you know, he does all these voices and he can be pretty funny, but all of Richie's voices still sound like Richie.
Right.
Like they, and when he tries to throw his voice as a ventriloquist, it doesn't get thrown very far, because he wanted to do the ventriloquism thing early on. It seemed like, and Eddie's like, well, you know, he'd be okay, but his mouth moves not just on like the hard like P's and B's, like
Like,
on
it just-
all of the sounds. It's just like he's just not very good at it, but he tries.
I admire that about him. I just don't find him funny. Or at least not funny enough.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think looking back, I liked Eddie's talking, you know, internal talking about Richie more than specifically what Richie was saying. Like I like
Eddie's funnier.
Eddie's pretty funny, but let's get back to the right when they are working on the dam, and you know, Ben and Bill and Eddie have been working on it all morning, or this might even be the next day. That is when Stan and Richie come
It's
down.
all the same day.
It's all the same day.
It's the same day. It's like right around lunchtime.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're doing that, and you know, clearly it's holding. You know, it's doing pretty well. And then Richie's like, "Well, guys, look, yeah, you starting to let some out. You know, your fill's running out." Doesn't even consider. He just jumps in. Doesn't know exactly what he's doing, but he starts doing and helping out. Didn't even take his shoes off. He's like, "Let's go fix this problem. Like, let's
and
just
took
jump."
direction.
Absolutely. And I liked when when Richie was talking to Ed and Ben about whose idea, you know, who actually built it and everything.
Mhm.
And so that part was interesting too, where he shows a lot of respect for Ben's abilities on being able to do that. I also liked when Ben was actually, they call him, you know, the general when they during the construction, and it took him a little bit to get used to having two more, you know, kids there to help, just to kind of get his confidence going enough to be able to boss people around effectively. But it clicked for him right away. Like,
Well,
after he just got used to it, he was
honestly,
like, well, they're here to help me, so let's just do it.
I think it actually is a nice little callback without the internal monologue that we had with Ben a couple chapters ago. He had to decide, is Richie making fun of me, or is he just, you know, trying to be funny, or this or that? And, you know, so it took him a minute to, like it said, you know, it took him to get a little bit to get warmed up to giving them orders and telling them what to do again.
Mm-hmm.
Because from what we know before, that's why he thought in his head, you know, he had to size him up and, you know, kind of realize, is this, you know, him making fun of me, or is this a real start of a friendship, or that kind of thing?
Right.
I want to say that Richie got a lot of shout outs between Ben's chapter and Bill's chapter before we actually met young Richie.
Yes.
I just remember hearing a lot about him beforehand. I don't know if it was only in, yeah, no, here it is. So, back in the Ben chapter, when they were talking about when Veronica Grogan, the body of Veronica Grogan had been discovered. He's really gross, a kid named Richie Tozier had confided to Ben one day during activity period. Tozier was a scrawny kid who wore glasses. Ben thought that without them, Tozier probably saw every bit as well as Mr. Magoo. His magnified eyes swam behind the thick lenses with an expression of perpetual surprise. He also had huge front teeth that had earned him the name Bucky or Beaver. Ben knows who Richie is. He's had conversations with him before. They may not have hung out, but he knew him and had talked to him.
They had a class together, they even said in this chapter.
So, I don't know. I just think, I agree with you that he's trying to size up Richie, but I think he at least had an idea of who Richie was beforehand to help him kind of gauge that. Not that he didn't have to gauge it, but at least he had some background knowledge on him.
So, with older Eddie driving around, we have another mention to, how good he is at being just comfortable driving and having his coins stacked up, ready for the toll roads and toll bridges. And he clearly says, mentions the silver dollars, again, the half dollars that they had used previously, which he clearly doesn't remember much about, almost by choice. He's just like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to remember necessarily. But it's just another shout out to the old true silver dollars that, Ben Hanscom had. And I just thought I liked the line where he said, you don't want to have to search for your silver, basically when you need it at the toll bridge. But I think it's a pretty good double meaning for how they end up using it later on as well, early on.
So as we get into talking about their stories, the way Eddie, his apprehension before Bill started, here's the thing, Eddie has known all day there's something wrong with Bill. Has known something's wrong, waiting for him to talk about it, doesn't want to talk about it, thinks he's going to say something, he doesn't say something. And then
because that was
Bill's
the night before,
ready,
right? Because they met Ben at the dam, and then that's when they walked off together. Bill went home. That's when the photo album thing happened.
Yes.
Okay.
But just that he has no idea what Bill's going to say, but he knows Bill so well that he knows something bad is coming.
Something's off.
Yes, because he hero worships that guy.
Mm-hmm.
More than just looking up to him. To me, it really feels like, and I know nothing other than what I see in movies, but in the movies when you've got like this company of young soldiers and they would do anything for their like commanding officer, not because they have to, but because like that's their person who's going to take care of them. And so we're going to, literally die for our commanding officer if he wants us to. It's kind of that level of loyalty and worship that I see in Eddie.
And he even mentions that as older Eddie too. He says, I probably would have died for Bill if he asked me to. He'd say, if that's what you're asking, just have you picked a date yet? Like, have you picked a time yet? Like, that goes exactly with what you're saying. And it's interesting that even older Eddie's not like shying away from that being truly how it was. Like his relationship with Bill. He's very aware that that's what it was.
Well, and I think part of it is that because Eddie says like Bill's their leader, not because he wants to be, but because if somebody has to be responsible, Bill's the guy who would do it. He's just has that natural, innate leadership, ownership piece in him.
And goes right along with his creativity on finding something to do. Like because that's that same same comment that he has. He's the guy that on a boring day he'll find something for everyone to be able to do and have a good time doing it. But then if you do get into trouble, he will. He's not going to shy away from taking the responsibility of whatever their actions have caused or whatever. So I really liked that whole characterization as well. Yeah. So let's talk about Nebolt Street and the leper.
Yeah, so my note on that is, okay, so I understood why you went by there the first time. You went there, you're interested, run down house, go check it out. A leper pops out and starts propositioning you for a quarter, for a dime, for free, and you run away, and you get away scot-free. The balls on this kid to go back and actually crawl under the porch now. I understand he was saying there's something drawing him there. But it kind of almost seems like it goes against his character that we know of up to this point. You know, like all we've seen of Eddie is been the timid, his mother in his head, kind of not coward, but he's almost scared of his own shadow at times, unless he has Bill around or someone else around. But for him to do this on his own, it just seemed a little, like I said, from what we've seen so far, out of character. And so this is the build up, I guess.
So for me, that whole scene where he goes back, it's kind of all mixed in with him at the railroad yard too. Like it's kind of all in the same time period that they're talking, and he's very interested in the vagabonds, in the hobos as well, because they ride the rails. I think it's comes back to that transportation technology thing that he's got, that he's, at least the way I'm seeing it, it's a draw for him to want to know more about those types of characters on their use of the rail. But he clearly doesn't want to be like caught by them, but he imagines himself being a hobo. He says, like Melissa had mentioned earlier, like this would be a really cool thing to do is what he's thinking. So of course he's going to go back, and it's not a good idea. And it's a little surprising for him.
Kids have dumb ideas.
Right.
I don't think he's nearly as timid or as worried as he's being raised to be.
He's actively thinking he should be worried about things because he's been trained that way.
I don't think he's actually that timid. So
right,
when
I agree.
He stops thinking that, this curiosity piece of him takes over, and he doesn't even notice that he's not doing that other thing.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I was just saying, like, up until this moment right here, he had seemed like he was always letting that timid side run him, but it's showing now. Now I'm not talking adult Eddie, but kid Eddie, everything we've seen, on that aspect. And then this is a great, creepy line.
Bobby does it for a dime. He will do it anytime. 15 cents for overtime. That's me, Eddie. Bobby Gray.
It's like, oh, it's so nice and creepy. Goes right along with You'll Float Too, and, they all float. It's kind of, I always just enjoy that. It's, again, I like the scary aspects of stuff, and just hearing that, it's like, oh, it's so creepy.
Yeah, the whole scene with Pennywise, Bob Gray. Yeah, so he references floating. He says, "Come on down here. Bring your friends and all that." And he mentions
Your friends are here.
Your friends, yeah. I'm gonna try.
Some
to
of your
find
friends
that.
are here.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I liked hearing some of his
Catchphrases,
theme phrases
Yeah.
again.
I really liked that he was wearing silver again. I was like waiting for the part where it tied into what we've seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a silver suit. I'm like, there it is.
Yeah.
That's what I was waiting for, because I knew it was coming. Like, I knew it was coming. And quite frankly, this to me was much, much scarier than the Ben thing or the Bill thing. And a little bit even...
Mike.
Oh, no.
With
Who's the one who died?
Oh,
Georgie.
I'm thinking
Corcoran.
Corcoran.
Eddie Corcoran.
Corcoran.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
that one. Like, even a little more than that, simply because... like the idea of that person who's sick, and I don't know.
Yeah.
And
No, I
with
agree.
his
It's
fingers on
grosser.
your back as you're
Yeah.
racing to. I just.
Well, and also
I
like,
don't like this one.
and well, the other thing too is the other ones at least were, movie, monsters or that kind of thing, like creepy things that you've seen, but. The leprosy, the hobo, that kind of stuff. Yeah, like you said, it's the sickness, it's the real world style stuff that, can be way I completely agree. This is probably the scariest Pennywise or creepiest Pennywise in the book
that we've had.
that we've had. And actually, I mean,
So I didn't like it. Like, period. I was like, and the only reason I even read it is because I had to write the summary. If I hadn't had to write the summary, boys, I would have skipped that like 2 pages and been like, nope. I know leper chases him. I'm good. I'm going to skip and move back to the dam because I did not want to read it to the point where I read this chapter I probably started reading it and writing my summary. Like, I started reading it maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I started writing my summary 3 or 4 days ago, and I finished the summary for this chapter an hour before we started recording because I had to force myself to read those 2 pages. I do not like the leper.
It's definitely got a more tactile and gross feeling to it that the other ones haven't. The other ones have just been, hey, it's trying to be scary to be scary. You know, it's pulling something that clearly the kid that it's going for is already afraid of. This is doing that same thing, but it's in such a nasty and gross and you can feel it kind of way.
And I think Benji got it. This could be real.
Mm-hmm.
This could happen. There really could be. And I think and that maybe is just my femaleness. Like, walking down the street alone for me is a scary thing. Just being a girl walking down the street alone. There are so many things that could happen to me that would not happen to you guys. So the idea that you could be walking by a house, now granted, Eddie should not have been climbing under the front porch of this house and climbing under a gross and germ-infested blanket, but whatever, beside the point. You really could be walking by a house and have some creepy guy come chasing after you.
Yeah.
It's an actual real life thing. It's less likely that you're walking on a bridge in the middle of winter with a frozen lake and a scary clown is out there and slides across the ice at you, or that a photo album is going to start bleeding in the middle of the room.
Or Mothra is going to come down.
Right. Those are less realistic. This could happen.
Yeah. The boys realize they've experienced the same or similar things will more than likely bring them closer together. You know, I think this is, besides the whole dam and sitting together and realizing, hey, this is right, I think this is the scene where, you know, at least the 4 of them, like, because we don't know anything about Stan, is realizing, okay, we're in this group, there's something going on. You know, Richie, you're just trash mouth, you'll believe us if Bill says so, you know, so. And then Stan not wanting to tell his story shows really why or how fearful he was, even from the start of the book. You know, like, kind of going back to my point of, you know, him not even wanting to tell what happened, or when we don't know up to this point, at least, you know, at least gives you an idea of maybe why he, you know, chose what he chose to off himself.
He definitely seems to be more of the, let's not face it, let's avoid it and ignore it, which I think is very likely what happened when he decided just to off himself instead of going back and facing it and actually trying to solve the problem.
Exactly.
Because clearly, whatever they end up doing, which again I don't know, but they all thought that it solved the problem. You know, that when they're thinking back, it's like, well, I thought this, you know, was a problem we fixed 28 years ago, but apparently not entirely. And so he's like, well, shit, if that didn't work, why? Like, you know, back in his introduction chapter where he kills himself, he's like, I have no chance, not gonna do it again. Can't do it, because he's clearly terrified at this point too. So
my last note on the whole thing is I love Mr. Neal and can't wait to read what he has to say again, just because you'll appreciate.
I was gonna say that's the police officer.
That's the police officer.
Shows up at the end there.
Is it the police officer?
Yes.
I couldn't tell it was a police officer. It just was Mr. Nell. I couldn't
But it's
remember.
Early in the chapter, they reference
to him.
But Luke, you'll appreciate it because it is a really good audiobook character, just the way the guy portrays it. And I'm assuming, Melissa, you don't hate it, but it's been a while since you read it, so we'll have to see.
So, as we usually do, as a new reader, I don't know a whole lot. So, Benji, do you have any questions for the new reader? Or Melissa, do you have any questions for the new reader?
I have one.
Okay.
Okay, so Eddie knows where to go and how to get there. Transportation guy, right? Ben knows how things work and how they fit together. Bill's the idea man, right? The leader who's going to get things done. Richie's the mouth. Stan's a person. So are these people just randomly coming together and they have these skills? Or do you think these people with these skills are purposefully being placed together in a group? And asked a different way, do you think there's a reason why they have different skills coming together into a group?
So I think the differences in skills that they have are just exaggerated for them to learn about each other. You know, for the reader, they're just exaggerated and they're focused on because you have to show differences in these characters. So I don't think it's like a specific, puppet master somewhere forcing these kids to be, a group. So they have these, a special set of skills that we can go and, deal with issues. I think those are just standing out because that's how the kids are differentiating themselves to each other. It's like, hey, I'm worthwhile to be around because I have this. Because none of them have confidence at all. So they feel like they all have to pretty much prove to everyone else that they're a valuable piece to whatever this team is, just in general. But I think it's just how kids are.
All right, Luke, as a new reader, do you have any questions or?
No,
anything?
Not really. I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot of plot this chapter, kind of as we said. It's definitely a lot more, hey, let's get gang together, let's have all of these characters that we've been talking about for 6 chapters actually start talking to each other, and we know a lot about who they become and what they end up doing. There's been so many references to the end game. We know that they're coming together as a team, and that's really, I think, all this chapter's for, and to show them starting to trust each other, to show their vulnerabilities in these stories that they have with Pennywise, and so that they know that, hey, I'm not crazy. I'm not making this up. And because clearly I'm not the only one having this problem. So I'm really excited for the next chapter. I hope we get the other characters that we know to be part of the group, in with the group, Bev. Mike, I still can't tell if he's actually one of this group because he's been so outside of everything. Like, he's like the narrator. He's just like the person telling us the story from everything I've learned from him.
It's like Lemony Snicket who's telling.
He's like just
simultaneous story is parallel where they never quite match, but they're running in the same timeline.
Yeah. He's just a couple weeks behind telling the story, but I'd be interested to see them, Bev and Mike get there as well. And I think those are the only 2 that aren't with the group yet, right?
Right. So
hopefully we can get that. But I do like that they didn't just say, oh, all 7 of them are just together now. Like they do show up in clumps. It's first Ben kind of falling in with Eddie and Bill the day before. And clearly they knew Richie and Stan, ahead of time. So those 4 were kind of already a minor group. But I think adding Ben to this now is making them a stronger group. And then we'll add the other 2 at some point, and that really is what forms the Voltron type character that we're going to have.
So I know in our last chapter, you had talked about how you were creating like a mega database of all your notices.
Yeah.
Did you update that at all for this chapter?
I haven't done it specifically, but we do have, Eddie's interaction with the leper. I know I can just probably look at it real quick, just to go through the topics that I have. But victim, Eddie Kasprag, age around 12, so again fits the young person thing. He does survive. Abuse, it's almost like personal internalized abuse that he has because of the way I don't want to say was raised, but was trained to think that he can't do things. It definitely takes the form of his greatest or most recent fear, being the leper. And it takes the form of that. The lure, I think, was just him kind of already being there, like challenging the fear that he already had previously in this same spot. So I think that has part to do with it, because kind of as Benji was mentioning earlier, like why would he go back and why would he go in there? I almost think it's almost like that switch of aggression that we see, and sometimes I think this was a switch of a lure on, because it even says the same thing, that when Ben is on the plane, he wasn't flying towards Derry. Derry was rushing towards him. It does the same thing for the house. Yeah. He doesn't feel like he's walking to the house. The house is moving towards him. So it's the exact same kind of thing there.
And that's kind of the point I was trying to get to with that was, I think, because he even says, he's like, I know I shouldn't be crawling under here. I know I shouldn't be doing this, but
which is the same thing we've seen with Eddie, or Eddie Corcoran walking up to the water. He's like, I should probably just go back home. This, there's nothing to see here. It's probably not a good idea. But he keeps going like that. We see that over and over. That whatever that lure thing is, the side of the attack is 29 Nebold Street, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the date, I don't know if we have a specific date, but it's the dam building day. I don't think they say specifically. Near water. I don't think it mentions there being water real close. But it's clearly not right there. You know, it's not a part of the scene as far as I can remember. So the next thing is Silver and Gray. Yeah, we see the silver suit. He calls himself Bob Gray again. Orange buttons, we see those. The poofy buttons.
Did we see the orange buttons?
Yes.
No. In
Yeah.
that scene, we don't see him. They mention it later on when Ben reveals that he saw the silver suit, but I don't think he talks about the orange buttons here.
Yeah, I had been looking for it. I didn't see anything about orange because there was the one bright blue eye, but I didn't notice anything about orange.
The leper was crawling out. It was wearing a clown suit. He saw a clown suit with big orange buttons down the front. So, yeah, it does mention those as well. And I knew that they were there because then later when Ben is talking about what he saw, he mentions them there as well because I don't think Eddie mentions the silver suit, but Ben's like, yeah, I've seen that. And you didn't mention the silver suit because I think he kind of figured that out too. We definitely have some smells. He calls it, but it's actually before Pennywise even shows up. It's when he's down there, and he mentions that it's the smell was worse underneath, booze and sweat, and the dark brown perfume of decaying leaves. So we do see the same kind of decaying, dead type smells, but there's nothing after Pennywise shows up. No witnesses, no injury, really, no dismemberment or bodily consumption. I don't think he was injured before the attack happened because he was just down there and climbs out. I don't think he was injured at all.
The bushes died.
The bushes died?
Well, when he came out.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
So technically death?
Sure, I'll buy it.
Okay.
It knew his name. There was a reference to floating. He was pulled from a happy thought because he was having a lot of fun imagining what it would be like to be a hobo and riding the rails and doing that. So I would consider him in a happy thought on that. And there was no reference to God at all. So I think that's only come up once. So that's probably gonna get the next here soon. But that's what I got at least. All right, Melissa, what was your favorite thing this episode?
My favorite thing in this chapter was the dam. I thought it was very cool how Ben figured out, like, instinctually how to build it, and how the boys just naturally fell into listening to him, and that as the group grew, so did the dam. And the fact that one of my favorite lines in the whole thing was the dam didn't move forward, it sprinted forward. That having all of these people to general, Ben was able to flood the whole area, that where they ate lunch was underwater by 2 p.m.
They had to move further up the hill.
Yeah, and to me it just really symbolizes the amount of power and influence that you can do with a group. With that these kids can handle, and what they can do when they work together. It was the first time we see them really working together, and it makes me very hopeful.
All right, Benj, what was your favorite thing in this chapter?
All right, my favorite thing was the leper, that creepy scene under there, because again, I like the guts and gore and the darker side of stuff, because this is actually one of the only truly scary scenes in this book, especially at least up to this part, because as we said, this is something that could happen. And also to play on top of it, just because I'm imagining it in my mind as I was reading, first and foremost, you have the leper, you have the disease, you have the guy trying to attack you, but second, you have the claustrophobia. You're under a porch, you're stuck, you have to crawl, as a guy does, crawl on tight places and stuff from time to time for my job. You're stuck in there, and it's a hard scramble to get out, and that just encompasses even more so anything that could be down there. And so for that, I love that scene. Like I said, it's real dark and gross and gritty and just creepy.
My favorite thing this episode was actually just a one line that kind of goes into a whole kind of neat scene, but I believe that it's Bill that says it, and he says Eddie's mom is worried that he's going to break and she won't be able to get her refund. It's just so funny, and it's before Richie gets there with Stan, I believe. It's just the three of them working kind of early in the day, and they're getting along so well and getting so much done. And they're so proud of what they've been able to accomplish, kind of the same thing that you were talking about, Melissa. And it's just so nice that that's like the first time this chapter we saw them, hey, let's be friends. Like, let's just have a good time, get our chucks, and
boys.
They're just being,
kids.
absolutely. They're just enjoying having a good time, So I really like that one. You can follow us on Twitter at Floats Down Here. You can send us emails. Tell us how much you like the show. Tell us what you
don't like about the show.
Don't like about the show, I guess.
No, don't tell us
Don't
that.
tell us that. Tell someone else.
Don't tell us so we can
But you
just
can, you
like
can,
us.
You can send those emails to floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Check out this show, all of our other shows at thepodcast.com. You can leave comments there as well. Subscribe and rate and leave comments and all of that fun stuff on iTunes and on YouTube. And we will see you next time when we do Chapter 8.
George's Room and the House on Nebold Street. Stay imaginary.
You'll float too.
Thanks.